Hi, friends. Um, so as I told you, I was probably going to do several of these little like video things during the course of this eclipse window and Mercury retrograde, and hopefully moving forward as well, now that things in my own life seem to be settling a bit. And so today I found myself thinking about how intense the astrology is right now, and how much I talk about that and how much I'm seeing other astrologers talk about that. And um, I think honestly for me that's really helpful, right? Like being able to identify or just get validation during intense periods. That's one of the things that astrology is so good at, but it does so much more than that because it helps us to understand the undercurrents of the complexity and the intensity. But even taking that a step further, it helps us to understand ways to work with that, concrete ways to work with that. And I think that sometimes when astrologers are interpreting those signatures or those themes in the chart, the ways to work with it, it's a lot of just like common sense, right? Like take a deep breath, try to respond rather than react, use your communication skills, right? So that's advice and wisdom that's good for any situation. But we can use astrology to get really specific about what tools might be best and ways to look at things as well. So today I was just kind of staring at the chart of the moment, and the chart of the upcoming full moon on Tuesday, the 16th, which is also another eclipse. Um, and I'm just really tuning into this kind of like rhythm that's happened with Saturn opposing the sun while conjuncting the south node of the moon. That's been taking place most of this last week, and that has felt for many people really exhausting or, repressive. Um, I haven't felt the effects of that too much, I don't think. But as of today and for the next 24 to 48 hours, we have this conjunction with, or I'm sorry, this opposition between Pluto and the sun. And so, where Saturn opposing the sun is more about this repression to life force or rebalancing of life force, can feel exhausting. Pluto opposing the sun is getting us in touch with more of our um, compulsive dynamics, the really deep undercurrents of our emotional selves. And because this was precluded by Saturn opposing the sun, it can be almost this like dynamic of like there being a repression that's happening or a depression or exhaustion. And then Pluto's like this like volcanic force that's coming in. And so it can be really helpful in the next 24 to 48 hours to really pay attention to what emotions are being activated inside of you and what responses you're having, especially the ones that seem um, like out of or disproportionate to the stimulus, the ones that feel volcanic, the ones that feel eruptive, the ones that are making you want to lash out at people, or that are making it feel like there's kind of like drama in your interpersonal dynamics, interpersonal relationships. And then remembering that we are in an eclipse window where the question is like, what needs to be let go of? What is being eclipsed out of our lives right now? And remembering that we are in a Mercury retrograde period. And so like, should I try and talk about this now or should I wait and feel? And so when it gets to this topic of, what does astrology say we can work with? Like, how can we work with it right now? What I'm really being drawn to is what's going on with the north node of the moon right now. North node of the moon in Cancer. And for this full moon, the sun will be right there with the north node of the moon, but Venus is coming in. I think right now we have the north node of the moon just being kind of like encased by the sun and Venus in Cancer. And so in evolutionary astrology, what we talk about a lot is the ways that the south node is like our really entrenched patterns, and then the north node is our dharma, or the medicine for the soul, or the way forward. And because we're looking at this at the collective level right now, it is talking about the ways that coming into right relationship with care and nurture and emotional self-reliance are really being called for everyone right now. And so one thing you can do is look at where the moon is as a facilitator for ways to nurture, okay? Because the moon is the ruler of the north node in Cancer. And so like today, the moon is coming into this delicious conjunction with Jupiter in Sagittarius. And so it is just saying, like, there's a little bit, it's this interesting paradox or conundrum, because there's a little bit of reprieve, there's a little bit of hopefulness and optimism that can come in today. Um, I'll be sitting with some friends tonight and releasing through fire, right? Like burning things and creating art. Um, and so then the moon changes signs every 2.5 days, right? So it's giving us this constant new input into ways that we can nurture and take care of ourselves. So then Venus coming into the picture is saying, again, it's just kind of like emphasizing this need for like home and nurturance. But more than that, the Cancer symbolism is about emotional self-reliance, as I said earlier. And I think that that's a really important thing to think about right now, this process of like self-parenting, right? Like being the parent for yourself that you wish to see in the world. Especially if you're having like emotional blips or emotional disturbances come up right now due to that Pluto energy, or just whatever's going on in your life. And I think this is an important thing to think about, because with so much energy in Capricorn on the South Node, we are doing big time releasing and realigning of what I would call healthy, of our notion of what healthy Capricorn energy is. And Capricorn is one of these archetypes that is so distorted in our culture, and it has become very much about the ways that we punish and the ways that we discipline. Capricorn in its what I would call healthy form is about, right responsibility and accountability and acceptance in some ways, that process of adulting that's like, okay, this is where I am right now. So now that I can see it clearly and I'm acknowledging it clearly, I can move forward. But instead, what's really emphasized in Capricorn right now is the facets of it that are more about denial and repression and punishment and discipline. And because we as humans tend to project so much, right? Like our society exists in these mechanisms where our fear of punishment, our fear of being ostracized, our fear of being different and therefore punished in really brutal ways. I mean, look at history, look at the ways that difference has been and continues to be punished. We then tend to project all of that out onto others, right? They need to be punished. They need to be humiliated. They need to be put into their place, without remembering or realizing that what we're trying to punish in others is what we actually contain within ourselves as well, right? And what we're trying to ignore or get away from or deny, repress, right? And so right now, one of those things is getting clear about ways that you do think other people should be punished, or think it's okay when other people are being punished, especially in dehumanizing ways. For example, children in camps on the border. And yes, I will keep coming back to that. But also ways that you fear that you might need to be punished, right? And ways that twists or changes your behavior out in the world because you are hiding that thing. And so then the North Node in Cancer with Venus and the Sun there is saying, like, it's okay. It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. Let yourself off the hook for these things, right? Like, don't make yourself unaccountable for things that you have done that are wrong or bad, but don't get into this kind of like victim perpetrator consciousness. Okay. And so one of the other things that's happening with the astrology right now is that Neptune in Pisces is creating a trine. It's creating a trine to the North Node and Sun and Venus in Cancer, but it's also creating a sextile to the South Node, Saturn, and Pluto in Capricorn. And so these are harmonizing aspects. And Neptune and Pisces are interesting energies to talk about, because in some ways they are very much about spirituality and divine love and divinity and return to source and that ocean of oneness, right? Which can be such an amazing thing, but we don't want to bypass, right? Neptune Pisces is also about delusion and escapism and avoidance and denial in a different way, which is kind of like denial through tuning out and going into la la land and fantasy world. But here I think that Neptune in its facet of being about healing and surrender and forgiveness is such a beautiful thing to have tapped into this eclipse window and what's going on with the stars right now, because it is about release. It is about saying like, oh, the only thing that punishment does, the only thing that like harsh punishment, physical punishment, punishment of shame and humiliation, and that increases guilt and feelings of not being good or worthy, the only thing that does is creates more need for punishment, right? Punishment just begets punishment. That's all it does, is it perpetuates the cycle. It creates a system of like, I am worthy, I am good, I am doing the right thing and you are not, and therefore you should be punished. And then that perpetuates a cycle of like me being afraid of what happens if I become worthy of punishment, right? So it's this kind of like cycle that just doesn't stop, and we're so locked in it. So then what does Cancer say? It says love, nurture, it's okay, let it go. Come together with family or people who feel like family. Really look into the ways that your ancestral patterns have carried forward and the ways that those need to be released right now, right? Cancer and its polarity, Capricorn, have to do with that kind of like genetic transference over time. A lot of the cultures of the world have had different ways of expressing and languaging that inherent connection of all things, and science is starting to catch up through the language of genetics and epigenetics, and the ways that fears and phobias and traumas carry with us in ourselves, right? So in some ways it's like, duh, yeah, thank you, science, for catching up. That's great. Um, but those things really exist, those family mythologies that carry forward. And so it can be a helpful time right now, as or if you're getting activated or getting triggered into your emotional body, to just say and acknowledge like, oh, there's so much hurt that's going through there. There's so much hurt right now that is up for healing and release and gentleness and tenderness. And so as we head into this last eclipse on Tuesday, last eclipse for now, closing this eclipse window, it just is that like, what does need to be released? Um, one of the great / terrible things about eclipses is that sometimes things will be released for you, right? Things will be eclipsed out for you. But pay attention to what your emotional body is telling you. Sit with strong emotions if you're having them or if they come up, especially if they're out of the blue, and try not to make decisions from that place. Try to let those emotions flow out and through, and then take a look at the situation and say, hey, what was going on there? All right. So I think that is all I have to say for now. Check me out at aquarianspirals.com or patreon.com/aquarianspirals for more personalized guidance.